Welcome back to the program. This is our economic outlook segment. Few things shape economic confidence like a government that listens. The recent review of the Yesera tariff decision sees electricity hikes capped at 8% for 2025-2026 and 7% for 2026-2027, less than what was initially proposed. In fact, significantly less than what was initially proposed. Meanwhile, inflation concerns persist. The Central Bank of Eswatini has revised its inflation forecast upwards to 5.25%, attributing the shift to global trade policy changes, particularly in the United States, and rising oil prices. Sanel Sbia joins us now virtually to decode what this means for Eswatini and our economic stability as the nation. Sanel, a very good afternoon to you and welcome to the program. We are hearing these news from the Ministry of Natural Resources and Energy, speaking to what we saw when this week started, something that had social media buzz and a lot of Emaswati enraged with the tariff hikes. How do you assess this new development, how significant it is, this intervention, and what does it signal about economic policy direction?
Thank you, Mr. Ngumalo, and good afternoon to the viewer. So what we are seeing here is a situation where I think the concerns of the nation were somewhat heard. So somebody listened and somebody listened to the outcry. But the fact that we are still seeing an increase means, we are going to see electricity prices going up in April, but they're going to go out by, say, around 8% right now and 7% the following year, not with the 14.02% for 14.02% that we had seen earlier on. So that means right now we are going to get a bit of, we had projected that 100 rands would get you, say, around 32 units. So right now that means we're going to be right closer to that 30, somewhat of a 36, 37 region, right? The 38 units region. So that means there is going to be a bit of relief, and it will go a long way towards the cost of living pressures that we are seeing, because, as it were, like you rightly pointed out, that inflation has been adjusted upwards, and these are the factors that come into play as we project inflation and as we whether revise it upwards or downwards. The cost of living pressures are still going to be there for the household sector, and for the business sector, the cost of doing business are also going to increase, but not by as much as one would have actually anticipated before.
Yeah, and I suppose even from a business perspective, this revision in terms of the tariff impact, particularly on operational costs for businesses and for SMEs, this shouldn't, affect them much. I think there's a bit of relief there. How do you chime in?
So, when you look at it from the standpoint of business, what it does is it increases the cost of living, right? The cost of doing business as electricity goes into the business prospect or the business or the production function, as it were. So what that would mean is they are going to see that slight increase, and still it is going to be a significant increase, because that they are going to have to pass on that cost. And as you pass on that cost, you're also taking away part of your market. So now that's going to be the indirect cost of this increment, because as the price goes up, that's the basic law of demand in economics. When the price goes up, demand goes down. So eventually the business sector is also affected through that market mechanism, the price mechanism. Yeah.
I want us to juxtapose this with the news that we are, learning from the Central Bank of Eswatini, the concerns around inflation that are persisting, speaking, of course, to the global trade policy changes, particularly in the US, and rising oil prices. But here at home, domestically, we are seeing, obviously we do foresee some knock-on effects on inflation, as it were, considering that electricity costs influence production and service pricing, really.
Yeah, so what we are looking at the global economic front is a situation where we're seeing Trump policies actually affecting the economy adversely as we see those tariff story. But one interesting thing about that tariff story, Mr. Nxumalo, is somehow it speaks to the art of the deal. If you look at what he's done with Canada and Mexico, the tariffs have actually been shelved purely because they're agreeing with his border policy. But right now, what we're looking into is that entire Gaza story, America taking over Gaza. So we just want to see how that is going to work, whether he meant that or it's part of the art of the deal. But if it's part of the art of the deal, it's not going to affect oil prices that adversely. And also, we've heard OPEC coming in to say they are actually going to increase their output in April. So that's going to further push prices down. But our major worry in terms of the inflationary effects is the knock-on effects and the market diversion effects of the tariffs, and also whether that is going to, if the Gaza war persists, whether that's going to have impacts on the global supply chain routes that we are seeing there, being affected and then causing those negative impacts in terms of the logistics prices going up, and then also Russia and Ukraine. If President Trump is not able to help us solve the trouble, and we might likely see Russia escalate in the absence of that military aid to Ukraine coming in through from the US. So that in itself will disrupt the supply chains in terms of the wheat that was coming through from Ukraine. And if he slaps more tariffs on Russian oil, again, that's going to be not tariffs per se, more sanctions on Russian oil. Again, there is going to be more inflationary because that would mean we are taking away Russian oil from the markets entirely and completely. And, taking away that 13 percentage in terms of global supply will inadvertently affect fuel prices negatively. And then there's also the exchange rate effect. We've seen exchange rates fluctuating very much, and we are most likely to see the dollar getting a bit of strength, and that in itself will translate into the price of imported commodities, and eventually it will come into affect our economy here domestically, Mr. Nzumalo.
Yeah, concerning times indeed, with the global issues that are happening, and tariff hikes and a lot of inflationary pressures that are looming. But Sanele, I'm afraid we have so much ground to cover, but so little room for detours. Thank you so much for your insights. That was Sanele Sbi, our economist, giving us our economic outlook based on the new proposed, it's not even proposed, the new 8% in terms of tariff hike, as well as the inflation focused by the Central Bank of Eswatini. Let's go for a net break. Kosi Ngwenya joins us for the club savings account. Masbuya.